Islamophobia is the fear, distrust, and suspicion of any and all things related to Islam or Muslims, or perceived as being related to Islam or Muslims. The perceived part is very important because right after 9/11 and the days immediately after 9/11, the first person whose life was taken in an act of Islamophobia was actually not a Muslim. The first victim, the backlash victim of 9/11 that we heard about the most prominently, was actually a Sikh gas station owner in Arizona who wore a turban and therefore was targeted and killed because he was perceived to be Muslim. Latinos in this country have been rounded up and detained and have been suffering under the Patriot Act just as much as, if not more than, our own communities. When we look at Islamophobia, we cannot look at it as a Muslim issue. It is an American issue. Islamophobia falls within a history of hate within this country. We are certainly not the first, and we will certainly not be the last. And so we must tie our stories to the fabric of this country. Because when we look into the history of our country, we look at, hate that has targeted African Americans, Latinos, Japanese Americans, Jewish Americans, Catholic Americans, you name it. Many other groups have been targeted and continue to be targeted. The UN has recognized this problem of Islamophobia. The former Secretary General Kofi Annan recognized it and said in recent years that when the world is compelled to coin a new term to take account of a rising tide of bigotry and discrimination, that is a sad development. Such is the case with Islamophobia. When a new term has to be developed, we know that something is happening. The relationship between the mainstream Muslim and Muslim American communities and the mainstream media is largely either defined or challenged by the fact that we have lost a lot of control over three critical factors. And to me, those three critical factors are credibility, authority, and truth. We who represent the mainstream, we who are the product of our communities, not the exception to our communities, have to prove that we have credibility, authority, and that we know the truth when it comes to our faith, our culture, and our lived experience. Osama bin Laden can videotape a message in any cave in the world and drop it off at any newspaper, any radio station, any TV station in the world. And it will get played over and over and over again ad nauseum on televisions around the world. And yet when we, the mainstream, the majority, try to do anything, I wish I could just videotape a message and drop it off. Wouldn't that be so great? If we try, and when we try, because we have attempted to do the same thing, we get asked, well, who's listening to you? What gives you credibility? What gives you any authority? And yet, what gives Osama bin Laden any authority? The media who choose to act as his recruiters.
Islamophobia, the categorization of Muslims as the other, and in particular the Western focus, if not obsession with the Muslim woman and the veil, are not new phenomena. Rather, they have a long history. They're supported and reinforced by a long historical tradition or discourse that is commonly referred to as Orientalism. Therefore, we cannot approach Islamophobia as an isolated, contemporary phenomenon, but have to understand it in a historical context. I will briefly discuss some of the main features of Orientalism and how it has influenced images of Muslim women, but still continues to do so in terms of influencing visual representations of Muslim women in both popular culture and media today. Edward W. Said, who was an outspoken Palestinian activist and a university professor of English and comparative literature at Columbia University, came out with this now classic book, Orientalism, 1978. In Orientalism, Said describes the, quote, subtle and persistent Eurocentric prejudice against Arabo-Islamic peoples and their culture, and the aggressiveness necessitated by the colonial expansion of the European powers, end of quote. Said explores the system of representations that form ideas of the Orient in the West. Orientalism is thus a Western discourse of the Orient that is a body of knowledge, a body of statements about the Orient that construct our social realities.